Hey Bears, welcome to the analysis of the tournament that happened on the 1st of February. Here are the winners. So in first place is HorseyGoesLeh, second place CatholicAnarchistBear, and in third place Justice JK. Well done to Rad Nomad Bear for this graphic as well. And we're going to have a look at two games played by HorseyGoesLeh, so he features in both. In the first game, as we see here, HorseyGoesLeh is with the black pieces and Early Years von Braun, also known as Spoolbear, is with the white pieces. So let's get into it. Spoolbear opens with e4. HorseyGoesLeh goes for his tried and tested Caro-Kann defense. Knight c3, d5, and Spoolbear takes the pawn. So as we can see here, taking the pawn with the pawn is a completely normal thing. Spoolbear just wants to make the game a bit spicy. That's his style, you know. So HorseyGoesLeh, who's already in this format more than 1,000 points high rated, is just thinking it's going to be a very quick game. And the queen takes the pawn, and now this is another blunder. Why is it a blunder? Why did the evaluation go down quite rapidly? Well, it's because HorseyGoesLeh has this fork. So it's a check fork. You fork the king and the rook in the corner, and white loses a rook. So very early in the game, it's quite a disaster for Spoolbear, and you might be thinking, why is Montenegro Bear, oh, that's me by the way, hello. Why is Montenegro Bear covering this game? Nothing interesting should really be happening because we've got someone rated 1,800 against the crazy Spoolbear. But you'll see. So Spoolbear does the right thing. When the queen has taken a rook in the corner like this, and you've still got a bishop here, you can put a knight here, and the queen is frozen. So black's queen is actually stuck. He can't take the pawn is defended by the knight, he can't take the bishop because that's defended by the queen, and he can't move anywhere. So Spoolbear has done this well. Now, it's not necessarily a matter of trapping the queen in a few moves and forcing the queen to be taken. It's more about just not letting the queen get into the game and playing a game without the opponent's queen, if that makes sense. HorseyGoesLeh strikes. This is a fine move. You're just pushing the pawn, getting your bishop developed. Maybe the bishop wants to come out, take the knight, and then you'll be able to move the queen around. But first, Spoolbear gets some quick development, gives a check, which is great, and then castles. So this is very nice. If Spoolbear would have just taken the bishop, then HorseyGoesLeh develops another piece, and when you're down material like Spoolbear is, you don't want to keep trading material. So Spoolbear castles, and what that means is after HorseyGoesLeh takes, white takes, and now white is already castled. White has a knight in an aggressive position, and black's pieces are all at the back. The king hasn't even castled. So compare this situation to the situation where black had his knight developed here and white hadn't castled. This is much better. So well done, Spoolbear. Now HorseyGoesLeh develops the knight here. For some reason didn't develop here on c6, which is much more natural. What this does is it protects the c7 square. And I forgot to mention that actually if something like this happens, white can give a check here. This is a common fork, where you fork the rook and the king. But it's really not that bad. As you can see, black's still winning. You can still give back material. Just get your queen back into the game. But HorseyGoesLeh was really determined to completely shut down Spoolbear's counterplay. Now d4. And this is fine. This is really good. You just, if black takes the pawn here, then white, as you see here, white's back in the game. White's now gotten some access to the king. Like it's an open line here. It's really good. It's really good. So Spoolbear on another level here compared to sacrificing the knight right at the beginning of the game. Now black castles, and black's probably thinking of their own little tactic. They're thinking, well, if Spoolbear takes the pawn here, now the queen is under attack. So this pawn here is actually pinned. If the pawn moves, then the rook is going to eat the queen. Does Spoolbear fall for this? What does Spoolbear play? He plays the best move in the position, and that's a queen check. Did you guys see this check? It's not common to think laterally like this. Is laterally the right word? Well, the point is, the focus has been around the center of the board, around trapping the queen. Spoolbear has found a check almost on the edge of the board, which is just great. And now, after HorseyGoesLeh moves here, white takes the pawn. And now the evaluation is suddenly in Spoolbear's favor. It's plus 0.5, which what that basically means is it's a game again. How is it a game? I mean, as you can see here on the top, HorseyGoesLeh is up 7 pieces of points. He's up a rook and a knight, essentially. So there's one move here which Spoolbear needs to play to satisfy what the computer says is now a game. If Spoolbear doesn't play this move, then they're completely lost. So can you find the move? It's related to the queen move that HorseyGoesLeh just played, which was a blunder. It's bishop f4. And this is a skewer, like a kebab. You have multiple things on the same line. Here, you've got the queen and the king on the same line, and this bishop is protected by the queen, all right? So the queen can't just take the bishop, otherwise they'll lose the queen. Does Spoolbear play it? You bet he does. Oh, I could have gone slower for dramatic effect, but Spoolbear plays it. Well done. He's seen 2 great moves. First the queen check, and then this bishop move. And HorseyGoesLeh, I asked him after the game, did you do this on purpose? Did you allow Spoolbear back in the game just for content? And HorseyGoesLeh said no, he forgot. Even, he didn't forget, he didn't see it. So even good players can really miss these, some of these tactical things. So well done, Spoolbear. Black gives up the queen, and HorseyGoesLeh moves the king into the corner. Now, we reach a pretty interesting position, which I want to look at. What happens, if you remember last analysis video, I showed you a smothered mate where the knight smothers the king at the edge of the board with a checkmate, and the king is suffocated by its own pieces. One example of that now is if, let's say anything. If white plays this, and then if black moves the knight here, whoop, white evaluation bar says mate in 4 moves. What's the mate? First you give the check with the knight. The king only has 1 move. Now you give a double check. So it's double check from the knight and from the queen. If the king comes here, then this is checkmate. So the king has to come back here. Now after the double check, you move the queen face to face with the king. The king can't take it because it's defended by the knight, so the rook has to take it. And then this is the smothered mate. So if you remember that from last time, good job. It's always nice to practice these fun tactics. So this is a tactic that is in the position in some cases. So that's just nice to remember. If the queen is cutting off the king escape, if the king is in the corner and you've got a knight here, basically knocking on the door, then you can think about this tactic. Always keep it in the back pocket. And right now, if the queen comes here, and let's say black plays a move like this, then this is checkmate. And there's actually only one way to defend. There's only one way to defend the pawn here, and that's bishop to c5. Bishop c5 is protected by the knight. It attacks the queen and it defends the pawn at the same time. That's the only defense actually. So Spoolbear's got quite a few fortunate things where the pieces are just in the right position. You don't have to do combinations. Sometimes it just happens like this. The pieces are in the right position. What does and it's actually very tricky. If black plays a common developing move like this, where are we, sorry? What I wanted to say, what white needs to play here, or what white should play, is a move that is going to stop the bishop coming here. So the whole white play is centered around getting the queen on this diagonal and trying to give a checkmate. So how do we stop the bishop coming here? Well, we'd maybe try and put some pawns up here. So The computer says white should try and create something like this. And even this simple move, if black plays something like knight f6, now look, this is apparently very good. Why? You just push the pawn, and you might be thinking, well, nothing's going on here. Well, if black plays something like this, now you come with this idea, and how is black defending it? Black's going to have to play some weakening moves. Now you can give some checks, get the king out, and the point is, now you've got play. So, Spoolbear's not going to find this, even someone rated more than 2,000 is not going to find the slow play idea of a3, b4, what's the word? It's a word where you prepare for the future. Prophylaxis, that's what they say in some chess terms. Prophylactically getting the bishop out of this square. Okay, that's enough about that. Let's see what happened in the game. Spoolbear moved the queen to the edge of the board. So Spoolbear's playing a bit of hope chess here. The hope is that HorseyGoesLeh, who's rated 1800, will forget that the rook is under attack. He might be thinking, oh, well, HorseyGoesLeh has already blundered before in this game, so maybe he won't notice. But, the queen was objectively much better on this square. You were attacking the pawn. You're more central. And here, all black needs to do is develop the knight, block the path to the rook, and now black is already better. So a few more moves go by. Spoolbear puts the queen back in the right square, but it's a bit too late now. HorseyGoesLeh plays the best move, which is bringing the rook up one square. You're adding an extra defense to this smothered mate theme, and you're planning to double the rooks. So this is a really good theme, something to keep in mind. If the opponent hasn't got any attack going and you want to know how you can improve your pieces, just double the rooks. King comes up, and then Spoolbear just decides to maybe hallucinate, give up the knight for free. And now you might be thinking, well, this is the end of the game. Black's swarming with their pieces. Now this is double attacked by the rook and the knight. It's essentially game over, but there are a couple of themes which are important to look at. So Spoolbear comes in here with the queen, which is quite annoying. There's only one way to block it. And now Spoolbear starts pushing the a-pawn. And we're going to learn something pretty interesting. Black takes the pawn with check. Spoolbear moves the king back down one square. And this is really important. You want to try and keep close to this sort of check. Because first of all, if the knight moves, now you're in touching distance to the rook, you can take the rook. If you would have moved here, now the knight takes it with check, you move back, and the other knight comes in, you're getting checkmated in a couple of moves. But that won't happen when the king is down here. Okay, so Spoolbear maybe has some sort of intuition where he plays some crazy moves that just blunder pieces completely, but fortune still favors him that he has some nice tricks up his sleeve. a5, and now this is a good try. The try is, what if black plays something like knight takes, and then white goes ahead with their plan of pushing the pawn? Well, what you're hoping for here is random move, two different types of checkmate. Checkmate with the pawn, and checkmate with the queen. And black can play something like this. The rook is defended by the knight. You're completely defending everything. If this happens, then you just take this. Everything's locked up. But in a position that Spoolbear is in right now, you want to throw everything you've got and see if the opponent will make a mistake. So just give it a crack. And this is the crack. Now, what happens if black takes the pawn? Well, it's checkmate. That's a checkmate. The bishop is useless. The bishop is actually blocking the king from running away. So this is a really nifty idea, and someone not as high rated as HorseyGoesLeh might just ignore it. Even someone as high rated as HorseyGoesLeh could just disregard it, disrespect the rating of the opponent, and think that it's nothing to worry about. They'll just continue with their attack. Okay. That's what happens if black doesn't address it. Black does address it, pushes the a-pawn. Now, white can't come up. But Spoolbear goes ahead with the idea anyway. So really good. Spoolbear maybe notices that if he can get the pawns near the king, there can be some ideas. Now black takes the pawn here, and now Spoolbear comes up. Takes. And now HorseyGoesLeh is aware that there is some sneaky thing going on. And now Spoolbear pushes the pawn here and here. Now here, believe it or not, you could make a blunder in this position as well. If black takes the pawn, again, that's checkmate. The king can't move from the bishop, and here, this square is defended by the pawn. So again, even in dead loss positions, you still try to throw the pawns up, try to get, I mean, it's lucky that the king is in a bit of a box here. So well done, Spoolbear, for giving us a nice instructional theme here. In the game, though, HorseyGoesLeh did the right thing, which is keep the structure intact, keep the pawn here, and spend a little bit of time calculating everything's going to be okay. HorseyGoesLeh only has 1 minute here, but Spoolbear's done a good job at practical play, which is have a look at the time your opponent has, have a look at any sort of counterplay you can have, because they might mess up. In the game, black went on to win. We don't really have to look at the end of this. I just want to look at a couple of moments. So, well done HorseyGoesLeh, well done Spoolbear for the entertaining game. Next game we're going to look at is between the two top seeds, CatholicAnarchistBear from New Zealand and HorseyGoesLeh again. So, what happened here? A couple of nice tactics and a very instructional endgame. We're going to sort of go quickly through the opening because these are two high-rated players and they know what they're doing. They're not really blundering anything. So again, HorseyGoesLeh went with the Caracan. I will talk about that later on. Now, this is an interesting idea to trade things off. You haven't really developed your other pieces yet. There's nothing wrong with it. But what black gets is black gets some tempi, which is the plural for tempo. So first black develops the bishop in a square they want to develop the bishop in anyway. And then once white develops here, black now develops the queen in a square where in the Caracan you want to put the queen here anyway. You're creating a battery on this diagonal. Now you're attacking the knight with tempo, which means it's black will gain an extra move if they take the knight. They're developing it with a purpose. So now once white has to move the knight, black is essentially up a couple of moves, all because white decided to move the knight back here to trade. So this is a bit high level. You don't want to put your pieces in positions where the opponent develops with a purpose and attacks it at the same time, if that makes sense. Black does the right thing. You don't necessarily want to take this because white just starts getting some ideas along a more open board. You have a look at the position. If I take this, is the position going to look better for me after everything, after the dust settles, or is it going to look better for the opponent? But in the game, black played this, attacking the bishop. So again, white has to do something with the bishop, and now black's got all the ideas. Black pushes h5, which is always a great idea, especially when the pawn is defended by the rook. White cannot go back here because that will be check. That's where in more advanced games some time is very important. White has to go White's only got one square left with the knight, and it loses a pawn because after takes, black has taken that pawn, and they're up a pawn. So HorseyGoesLeh just playing natural developing moves, being aggressive when you need to, and taking advantage of some bad timing from CatholicAnarchistBear. You can trade this because you're up a pawn, you might as well give it a try, right? And now just imagine if black could start pushing all of these pawns down the board. That seems to be the plan. Black castles kingside, which sort of goes against that. Let's see what the computer thinks of black castles queenside. Almost the same thing. They're different kinds of games. This would have been a bit more aggressive. Castling kingside is fine though. And then let's just see what happens. Black brings the rook behind the queen because there's no really other square for the rook to go. This is completely fine right now. Black moves here. And now it's -2. So HorseyGoesLeh is just squeezing the advantage out right now. And there's a really cool tactic, and it's a theme in some positions which happens here. And if HorseyGoesLeh really is lazy, they want to finish quickly, maybe they're on the bus is about to stop and they need to get home and do stuff, they can opt out for a draw. And the draw would happen if black plays something like this. You just take the pawn, you give up 2 pawns for the bishop, and it might soon be 3 because the queen can take this one afterwards. What happens if the queen now blocks the check? Well, you take the bishop with check, and it gets worse. So the king only has 1 square to move. You can take the pawn, and you can essentially just come back and forth if you really want to draw. And what the computer says, which is winning essentially, is that after king comes here, you can give 1 more check maybe, and then you bring the rook. This rook that you put back here just for no real reason, it now comes to the party, and you're winning. Black's winning. I mean, white's just not going to have a good time. Again, if queen comes anywhere here, you can take this bishop. It's an unfortunate position that CatholicAnarchistBear put his bishop in. Even if something like this, to block the rook coming out here, you're still going to play this. And you might be thinking, oh, I'll push b3, so now the bishop cannot stay on this line. The bishop, the rook has to come back. Well, now the rook can come back here, and now the rook is gonna give check here. So, yeah, not good. So not only is it a draw option, but HorseyGoesLeh could have gone for this. Maybe could have just calculated. They had 8 minutes. Calculated that at the end of it all, this bishop is in a precarious position. Once the queen gives the check here, the queen is attacking the bishop in case the white queen moves. Okay. In the game, black's just putting the pressure on, just slowly squeezing. Very good play from HorseyGoesLeh. CatholicAnarchistBear is doing a great thing as well, trying to put pieces on the same line, but he's down a pawn in a locked position, where HorseyGoesLeh's pawns are very solid and you can't break through. It's very tough. So HorseyGoesLeh just has to not blunder, really. He's playing a nice idea. So HorseyGoesLeh puts the queen here on the same line as the king, and he's hoping for a nice little tactic, which is rook takes pawn here. You cannot take the pawn because then the queen would take the king. That's illegal. And so black's just won another pawn. Oh, hello. Okay, so Thomas will join me for the rest of the analysis. So what does white do after this? White moves the king up, and white has a sneaky idea now. After takes and rook takes, if black moves the queen, let's say something like this, now this is checkmate. So CatholicAnarchistBear is also got some tricks up his sleeve, and that's what good players do. Good players, even when they're in a lost position, try and find your own tactics. Put your pieces in a good position. Even if black plays something like this, well, that's not going to work. The pawn is pinned. Just like in the previous example, where the pawn couldn't move, it was in front of the king. Black can't do that. So what does black play instead? Black trades the queens. You're up 2 pawns. You give a check, and white has to take the queen. And now it's essentially a wash-up. Black gives some checks and then brings the king up, which is very, very good. Once, let's come back a bit. Once black played this f5 move, this pawn became a backwards pawn, and it's very important to get the king up to defend the pawn, up here or here to defend the pawn. And that's exactly what HorseyGoesLeh does. Right here, and here might as well. And bring both rooks on the file, and now it's checkmate in 7 moves. Checkmate in 7 moves? How can that be? Huh? Okay. So, what is it? Well, it's a bit of high-level tactics. You got to try and get both rooks involved. So first you give a check down here. This rook, again, unfortunate positioning for Catholic Anarchist Bear's pieces. This rook, let's say bye-bye. Bye-bye. Go to mum. Catholic Anarchist Bear's pieces are just in the wrong position again. So the king can't go. The king only has one square up here. And now, HorseyGoesLeh, it's checkmate in 6. HorseyGoesLeh plays the check here, which gives away the checkmate sequence. Because what happens is now the king starts to run like this. What black should have done instead, they got 4 minutes on the clock, and it's pretty common in these sort of the king is trapped structures, is first you make sure the king can't move, then you give the check. So instead of giving the check first and then pushing the pawn, first you push the pawn, and now there's no way that white survives. Because the next move is rook here, and the king's busted. The computer says the only way for white to survive an extra 5 moves is to give up the rooks. So it's dead lost. HorseyGoesLeh just needs to find this extra bit of planning. Okay, in the game, black gives a check, gives and another check, and even though white runs away, black's still completely winning. Black moves the king closer. Ooh, it's okay. Black moves the king closer, and now targets the pawns. Now trades rooks. Because if white moves this rook, then black's going to take one of these pawns. So great technique by HorseyGoesLeh. Brings the king up, pushes the pawn. But now we're going to have a look at the end game. What's interesting about the end game? Black has 2 extra pawns, and black plays this, which is completely good. White takes because they have to take, all right? If they don't take, black's going to take the pawn and it's game over. So it takes, but HorseyGoesLeh has 2 options. Take with the pawn or take with the king. What would you guys play? If you played take with the pawn, then you're giving white some chances, because white can play this, and then psychologically you might be worrying a bit. Because if black plays a natural looking move like pushing the pawn here, now the evaluation is starting to go back to normal, because white pushes the pawn and the king is a bit far away. Because what happens if this happens? If black tries to try and catch the pawns, well, now you just push. Black is a bit too slow. You can't come up here because you take the pawn, and you can't come to this last square because it's protected by the pawn. So really, really unfortunate. Something just as natural, right? Look at this, just a couple moves, black's completely winning. You play the wrong move once in an end game, and something like this can happen. What did black need to do? Well, first of all, black just needed to take with the king, because you keep your pawns connected and next to each other. When you take with the pawn, they're doubled and they can't move anywhere. They're stuck behind each other and in front of each other. So you've basically lost. Oh, and also that pawn before was protecting this square. Right? If the king takes, now white doesn't have any counterplay because you just take the pawn. So HorseyGoesLeh, 3 minutes on the clock. Don't give your opponent any counterplay. You don't need to take with the pawn. You take with the king. Pawn takes. But here, computer says black's still winning, because instead of pushing the pawn here, you just come up with your king. And you might be thinking, oh, this is a bit counterintuitive. You're giving up a pawn. Well, in endgames, it's a double pawn, and double pawns are basically useless. The most important thing is timing. So here in positions like this, it's worth spending a bit of time calculating the variations. Pawn here, pawn here, pawn here, pawn here. Because there aren't many pieces left. You just got to calculate a little bit. So what happens if I play this? Well, what happens if black plays this? White can't really wait around. White can't move the king back, because then black's going to come in here. It's game over. So then you calculate, oh, well then white essentially has to play this. Well, now black could play this, but then you run the risk of this, right? Again, if this happens, oh, wrong, you have the same thing as before. and white's winning. So all of black's other pawns are frozen, so there's only two moves. There's only black pushes the pawn, or black comes here, and that's the right move. And what does white do if white pushes the pawn here? Well, you just give it up. And even though you might be worried, oh, well, now white's going to take two of my pawns. All you have to do is come here, and you can even bring your king away from your pawn. All you have to do is make sure that the other king can't come anywhere near the pawn that you're going to push. All right, you push here. White tries to come close. If you push something like this, it gets a bit tricky. White's maybe getting a bit close, but better safe than sorry. Just move the king here. And if something like this happens, just really, you don't want the... And now you might be saying, oh, well, I've gone in front of my pawn. This is counterintuitive. No, because now all you have to do is put your king here and then push the pawn. White can't do anything. So, game over. Ice cream cone. There's a little ice cream cone here. It's summer in Australia, so that's the new word that he's learnt. Okay, so yeah, black in positions where there aren't many moves, just spend a bit of extra time calculating. Okay, in the game, black gave the chance to white, and black pushed the pawn, white pushed, and now it's a race. Two queens on the board, and it's essentially a draw. Here, white's actually winning. Why? Probably some sort of geometric thing. Says this is winning because what you're going to do is probably try to win the queen. Because if the king comes up on this file, then you've triangulated well. The king has to come up here, and then I think eventually you can force the king. You can force it. It's okay, whatever. That's not the point. We're just going to have a look at what happened in the game. In the game, it was a draw because they traded everything. So, yeah, HorseyGoesLeh just crushing the whole game. Really professional, slow rolling play. We saw that bishop sacrifice that he could have made, but you know, his method of just slowly doing it was great. Got to push the pawn, prepare the checkmate instead of just letting the king escape, and then spend a little bit of time just calculating those pawn endgames. 3 minutes should be enough. You've always got the draw, so the draw is not the end of the world, but it was the only draw of the tournament. So thanks for watching, guys. That's the analysis. It was a bit long again, but the games were interesting. So Spoolbear, CatholicAnarchistBear, and HorseyGoesLeh. Thanks for making entertaining games. See you next time.